All county offices will be closed July 4th in observance of the 4th of July holiday. All county offices will reopen on Thursday, July 5th, 2018.
Beginning June the 27th, if you have an outstanding misdemeanor or a felony warrant, we are giving the public a chance to clear their warrant by taking advantage of being processed at the satellite booking office in lieu of the county jail. This is also an opportunity to avoid your name being published on a criminal warrants list and being arrested at your home or place of business. For further information, call 546-2093 or visit epcounty.com and click on Operations Safe Streets.
Commissioner Andrew Haggerty would like to invite you to his weekly breakfast meeting that takes place every Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. at Danny's Diner, located at 4690 Trans Mountain Road. Every week he has a different speaker who will be discussing topics of interest for the community. So if you live in the Northeast, West Side, or anywhere else in the county, come and join us for the breakfast meeting.
Don't wait in line, pay online. Visit the Financial Recovery Division website at http://www.epcounty.com/budget/financialrecovery.htm to make your payments online or find out more about our kiosk locations. We now accept payments on misdemeanor, felony, and justice of the peace cases.
You can now watch Commissioners Court meetings on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and search for El Paso County Commissioners or El Paso County, Texas. Subscribe to our channels to see our latest videos.
Did you know that you can save money on the cost of your medications? And doing so is easy. In 2015, the County of El Paso launched a prescription discount card program from coast to coast. The cards are available to all El Paso County residents free of charge and everyone qualifies. You can pick up a card at any county office location, Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, or Target pharmacies, or simply print the card at www.coastrx.com. Happy savings!
Did you know the County of El Paso's Purchasing Department is responsible for ensuring that all items and services needed by various county departments are purchased in the manner required by the state of Texas? Whether through formal sealed bids or smaller dollar quotations, the county purchasing team is dedicated to finding the best contracting return on your taxpayer dollars. Additionally, the Purchasing Department is responsible for the tracking of inventory within the county and properly disposing surplus to public auctions. For questions about how to become a vendor and compete for county contracts, or to learn more about public auctions, please contact us at telephone number 915-546-2048.
The 346 District Court Judge Angie Juarez Barril started the El Paso Veterans Treatment Court program in 2012 for veterans and active service members that have been arrested and charged with a felony or misdemeanor criminal offense. To be considered for the specialty court, the statutory criteria includes be a veteran or current member of the United States Armed Forces, including a member of the Reserves, National Guard, or State Guard, and suffer from a brain injury, mental illness, or mental disorder, including PTSD, or be a victim of military sexual trauma, all occurring or resulting from military service. Call Sylvia Serna, Veterans Program Director at 915-546-2119, or email her at sserna@epcounty.com for any information.
Did you know that the County of El Paso's fixed asset control and inventory disposal is handled through the purchasing department? Throughout the course of each business year, the county holds live public auctions to dispose of aged equipment, vehicles, furniture, and other items that are no longer needed. To find out about upcoming auctions or to learn more about the county's inventory disposal process, contact the purchasing department at telephone number 915-546-2048.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 28, 2018. Commissioner's Court is meeting in special open session. Judge, how would you like to go about today's meeting?
If we could take item 3 first, because I know we have members from the auditor staff here, so we could do that, and then after that, unless there are requests for any additional changes, then we can take everything else in order.
Thank you, sir. Item number 3. Pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code Sections 114.023, 114.024, 114.025, and 114.026, please accept the attached presentation and the interim financial report for the month ended May 31st, 2018. The interim financial report is located on the intranet at http://www.epcounty.com/auditor/publications/monthly reports.htm.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. My name is Linda Hemme, and this is Claudia Menendez, and Claudia will be presenting the unaudited interim financial report for May 2018.
This is a condensed financial report that will be published in the Sunday newspaper on July 1st. This table represents the month-to-date and year-to-date revenues collected. During May 2018, the county collected $13.3 million in general fund. This table shows the general fund revenue change between fiscal year 2017 and 2018. The general fund revenue collections are following a similar trend to last year's collection. The main changes are property taxes, increased $4.1 million due to timing and the impact for new constructions. Sales and use tax, year-to-date has an increase by $1.3 million due to an increase in consumer spending. Charge for services represent a decrease of $1.6 million, mainly due to timing of federal email billings. This table shows an overview of the revenue collected compared to the estimated budget for the year. So far this year, 85% of the estimated total revenue had been collected. These tables compare year-to-date revenues budget for 2016, 2017, and 2018. It's showing total revenue in the two largest revenue types, property taxes and sales taxes. This table represents month-to-date and year-to-date expenditures. In May, general fund record total expenditure of $20.6 million in a year-to-date total at $164.7 million. The following slides we will show the breakdown of general fund expenditure in more detail. This graph shows an increase of $11.2 million during fiscal year 2018 in compared with 2017, and an increase of $1.2 million during May 2018 in compared to May 2017. This table shows a year-to-date expenditure categorized by type compared to 2017. Personnel expenditure shows an increase of $3.8 million, which is due to salary adjustments and new hires. Operating expenditures increased by $4.4 million, were mainly due to an increase in contract services, professional services, and maintenance. Transfer out increased at $2.8 million, which was mainly due to timing difference in the cash funding of grant match transfer. This graph shows the percentage of expenditure year-to-date versus 2017. Expenditures are running slightly higher compared to last year. As May 2018, expenditure are 54.7% when compared to last year 53.6%. This graph shows the expenditure broken down by function of government. 46% of the expenditure are related to public safety. 25% to administration of justice, 25% to general government, and the remaining 5% to all other functions of government. Of the total general fund expenditures, 39 million is for general government, 41 million is for administration of justice, 75 million is for public safety, and the 8 million of the other functions of government. This graph shows the future trend for revenues, expenditures, and budget, which is based on historical data. Revenues analysis project 5.2% average growth during the next 5 years. Expenditure analysis project a 5% average growth during the next 5 years. In general fund budget analysis project 5.8% average growth during the next 5 years. Questions?
No, it looks like everything has remained relatively consistent to the last presentation that we had and some of the other discussions that we've had, and some of the funding that had not come in is starting to come in, it looks like. So,
Yes.
okay, so we're starting to get a better picture of the budget situation. I have no questions. Commissioners, do you have any questions? I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you putting us first.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Normally
there's a motion to accept the report.
So I'll make a motion to accept the report.
Second.
Commissioner Pettis?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stout is absent. Commissioner Haggerty?
Aye.
Judge Vogt?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. You have a
Have a good
wonderful day.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Going back to the regular order, item number 2, receive a presentation and analysis of the Escalante Park Golf Course operations and provide feedback and recommendations to the department regarding the report.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Judge. My name is Laura Larimore. I'm here from the Budget and Fiscal Policy Department. I've been asked to put together an analysis of the Escalante Park Golf Course operations. So just a little history of the park. In the 1930s, the International Boundary Commission deeded the land to the county with the requirement that the county use the land for public recreational park purposes. The voters voted on levying a special tax to fund the development of the park, and the golf course was opened in 1955. When looking kind of at how the operations of the park are running, I wanted to also look into just golf participation and in general. So this is some of the information I found from the National Golf Foundation. From 1986 to 2005, this was the biggest golf industry expansion in the history of the game of golf. About 5,000 new courses opened during that time, which was about a 50% increase in the market. In 2006, there was 30 million American golf players, and the National Golf Foundation defines a golf player as someone age 6 or older who plays golf at least once a year. From 2006, which was kind of the peak of the market, to 2013 is when the game kind of started declining. From 2006 to 2013, there was 8 consecutive years of courses closing, outnumbering courses that were opening. And then in 2016, there was 23.8 million players, which was a 21% decrease over the past 10 years. Kind of understanding why fewer Americans are playing golf. One reason is golf's calm pace versus the modern lifestyle. A game of golf can take 4 hours to play, and with the kind of go lifestyle, people just don't want to spend the time to play a game for 4 hours. Also, with the declining middle class and economic recession, if people have to cut things from their budget, these are the types of things that they might cut. Also, the difficulty of play. A lot of golf course designers, with all the new technology coming out and all the new equipment, they wanted to make things more interesting, but it kind of brought a higher learning curve where new players and beginner players aren't entering the game as much.
I would concur with that. Difficult to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you like entities like Topgolf entered the market in quick.
You can look silly at Topgolf.
Yeah.
I've been in a tournament with it's 187 yards to hole. That means nothing. I'm gonna grab a club and hit it. I don't really care.
So what we've seen is that courses are closing and less players are playing, but it was interesting to see that golf rounds being played are actually holding pretty steady. So in 2015, there was a 1.8% increase from the previous year. In 2016, there was a 0.6% increase from the previous year. And the number of rounds of golf averaging at public courses are 34,547 in 2016. And then I also have the Escarte golf course figures here below. So you can see that our total rounds of golf annually in 2016 was 31,450. In 2017, 32,129. And then the 2018 number is projected based off of Q1 and Q2. Although there's less courses and less players, the people that are playing are still playing just as much. There is still participation happening. When looking at the Escarte golf course, we looked at the Delta 9 as well as the 18-hole course just to see how the two courses are being used. You can see here the majority of use does come from the 18-hole course. The Delta 9 on average over the last few years is about 8 or 9% of the play. Looking at the effect of the golf decline in the industry on municipal golf courses specifically. There's 3 different types of golf courses: public courses, which are open for anyone to play at, but they're run privately; private courses, which are like country clubs; and municipal golf courses. So public courses are really where the majority of courses are closing. The public courses account for 56% of the market, but 90% of the closures. And then the other 10% of closures are split between private courses and municipal courses. But currently municipal courses are at an all-time high. So municipal facilities are closing less often than public courses. And there's currently 2,492 municipal courses throughout the country. As you guys just mentioned Topgolf, I thought it was interesting to look into Topgolf as well. This is a new measure that the National Golf Foundation has just started looking at over the last couple of years, and they call it alternative golf experiences. So participation in off-course golf activities does not negatively impact golfers' consumption of traditional golf. It actually increases golfers' engagement with the traditional game. So 52% of non-golfers who visited a Topgolf facility had interest in playing golf on an actual course. By comparison, only 15% of non-golfers in the general population said they would like to try playing golf. So I had thought maybe Topgolf would be taking away business from traditional golf, but it's actually the opposite. If someone visits a Topgolf facility, they may be more interested in actually playing on a traditional course as well.
Until they go there and they see they don't have the shiny holes.
This was a new measure that the golf course is just starting to track, which is users by zip code. So as users are coming to the golf course to play, they're asking what zip code they're coming from so we can start looking at who in the county is using the course. So the majority of attendees are coming from these zip codes, which are all over the county. They're not just specific to the area that the golf course was in, which is interesting to see.
And so these are the only zip codes that folks are?
No. These are just the highest percentages. The ones below that were all 5% or less for each zip code, so these were just the top ones.
That represents a little over 60% of your golf activity.
Yeah.
All right, so now getting into the financials for the golf course, looking at the revenue and expenditures. So I went back to fiscal year 2008, so over the last 10 years. And these are the revenue and expenditure numbers and the difference between the two for each of the last 10 years, both the figures and then their graph there as well. So as you can see in 2008, the revenue and expenditure lines were pretty close to breaking even. in fiscal year 2017, there is a greater gap there.
I have a question on that. Does
Yes.
that include all of the capital improvements that were put into the golf course that year as well?
I don't believe so.
So not only
I
do
think
we
those are
lose,
direct expenses.
Right.
Huh? Yeah. So not only did we lose 869,000, but we also put in pretty substantial direct expenses, or capital improvements as well.
Yeah, our most significant was mid 2000s with the irrigation system that we put in. That was the most, and then we did some roof repair and the golf carts.
With the golf carts, I think we did some
golf carts. We did as
We're
an
doing
operating.
roof repair right now.
So that's the golf cart expenses reflected.
I remember seeing a $250,000 line item for improvements to the golf course last year as well.
That was both. We did the demolition. We're doing the demolition
demo
and the roofing.
roof replacement.
And that's and that's been my frustration. And I understand the need for a golf course, but if we have 11 golf courses, do we need to lose $1 million on the county's golf course? Is my opinion.
So we have some, as Laura continues, we have some other comparisons and information, and some recommendations.
So this here is the salary, operating, and capital costs. So the first bar on the left is the salary, the second is the operating, and the third is the capital. So you can see here year over year the salary and operating are pretty steady with where they're at. And this is looking just at revenue for fiscal year 2017 to see what areas are bringing in revenue. The highest revenue areas were the green fees and the golf cart rentals. The green fees make up 57% of revenue, and the golf cart fees make up 26% of revenue, which is the majority, which is good to see and makes sense that the actual operations of people coming in and playing golf is what's bringing in the revenue for the course. Looking at revenue year over year from fiscal year 2008 to fiscal year 2017, again, the same revenue categories continue to bring in the most revenue. Green fees, followed by golf cart fees, followed by the food concessions, followed by the pro shop sales. And then also looking at the expenditures for fiscal year 2017, the highest expenditure areas for the golf course are in salaries and benefits and the water utility. So 48% of the expenditures are salary and benefits, and 31% is for the water utility.
And Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, that has been the single largest growing line item of the budget that has grown that loss on the golf course, has been the increasing water cost.
Yes. Looking at expenditures from fiscal year 2011 to fiscal year 2017, you can see here the same categories. The salary and benefits are the highest expenditure, followed by water utility, followed by operating expenses and rental and leases.
So what do we lease?
The golf carts.
The carts. Oh, that's the income from leasing and renting them
The
out?
expenditure for, yes, the leases.
So we lease them from the company, and then we lease them from the company, and then we lease them out to.
Oh, we didn't purchase them?
No.
No?
No.
$68,000 a year lease.
And we did a lot of analysis on that. Sam Trujillo did that analysis for us. And we did a lot of analysis on the option of purchasing versus leasing, and including what type of golf carts, and this is a much better method for us.
I remember talking about whether to go electric or gasoline. These are gasoline, right?
These are, I think we went
gasoline, we went back to electric.
Yeah,
so, okay, we went to gasoline not too far back, right? Now we're back to electric.
No, we have not. No, we've stayed since our last.
Yeah, that's all I remember is we were going.
Veronica, or the gas or electric?
Oh, they are
gas.
Sorry.
Yeah, they
gas,
were electric, and we went to gas.
But that's still a savings.
That was part of the analysis, yes, sir. The cost of operating, I think, was similar, but the quality and the lease terms were much better.
So we lease them to lease.
Yes.
Lease out.
To rent out.
Okay, thank you.
Were there a lot of new hires in 2017?
Yes, sir.
This was also due to just some changes in the accounts. From fiscal year 2016 to fiscal year 2017, the golf course employees were moved from the parks event account to the golf course account. All right, so just looking at El Paso County Parks and Recreation and the parks mission statement. The county parks and recreation mission statement is to provide a safe, healthy, and enjoyable recreation environment for the citizens of El Paso County by providing a rich mix of cultural, recreational, and social opportunities. Citizens of El Paso County and their visitors can enjoy an enhanced quality of life. The parks are also in line with the county's strategic plan through both the vision and the goals of creating a vibrant community with a dynamic, diverse economy, world-class center for health and entertainment for all. So just a reminder that the reason we operate the parks is to provide a service to the community, and it comes in that quality of life. This is from the National Recreation and Park Association, just looking at benefits of parks as a whole. 99% of local government officials agree that their local communities benefit from local park areas. 85% of Americans seek high-quality park and recreation amenities when choosing a new place to live. And economic research has demonstrated consistently that homes and properties located near parklands have higher values than those farther away. In addition to those benefits, there's also a health benefit, as individuals who exercise moderately in public parks experience a $351 health savings per year, and that rises to more than $700 per year for adults over 65. This is a map of the El Paso golf courses that are in the area. So you can see where Escarate is compared to where the other ones are located. There are a few that are within, right here, within a 5 to 10 mile radius, and then the outlying ones are all 15 miles away or further.
Lone Star, is that the one off of Montana and Hawkins?
Yes. These are the El Paso golf prices. This is based on the daily green fee for just a standard weekday rate with no discounts or anything like that, plus a cart fee. So the Escarate Golf Course daily green fee plus cart is $29. This goes all the way up to $65 at Butterfield Trail Golf Club, and then there's a couple country clubs listed there that are membership only, so they don't have a daily fee available. But this is the range of prices in El Paso for golf. This information here comes from the El Paso Times article that came out a couple months ago. It's a comparison of the municipal courses in El Paso. So this is Escarate Golf Course, Butterfield Trail Golf Club, and Painted Dunes Desert Golf Course. This was to show you that kind of everyone's in the same boat with the deficit that they're facing. The revenue and expenditures are listed here for 2017. As well as the payroll expenses for each golf course and the number of golf rounds that are played at each golf course.
Is there any, do we know why there might be more folks using the Painted Dunes golf course as opposed to ours? It seems like that might be one of the closest in comparison to our golf course. Is there anything that they offer that we don't, or, I mean, do we have any insight on that?
I know that they operate a little bit differently since they have a management company. Veronica might be able to give a little more insight on that. I'm not sure.
Why?
If we know why there might be an additional 2,000 folks playing rounds at the Painted Dunes golf course as opposed to ours, and if they offer anything that might be different than our golf course that might lend more folks to want to go out there.
I don't think it's much different. I just think it's the environment and the quality of the
course.
We don't have any like concrete survey data or anything like say like why do you go here versus there.
And the Painted Dunes one is northeast. It's probably more than north. Since none of the northeast head coach showed up on that list, my assumption would be most of the Northeast residents do it.
Okay, thank you.
And Northeast has a lot of retirees who.
Veronica, if you want to take a seat, you can. I don't know if you want to for the presentation. You may not want to, but thanks for being here.
We'll keep calling you in so you can.
So breaking it down just a little bit further, the El Paso Times article did include the Butterfield Trail Golf Club revenue and expenditures for the last 10 years. And the losses that they've had each year from fiscal year 2008 to fiscal year 2017, which you can see here is between 800,000 and just over $1 million each year. So they've also been operating at a loss. This is the revenue and expenditures of other county recreational facilities. So we can just take a look at the sports park, the pools, the park as a whole, and see the revenue and expenditures for those facilities as well in comparison to the golf course. So this includes fiscal year 2016, 17, and 18, and where each of those facilities is at. Are there any questions on this line? And the last item here is the future of Escalante Golf Course, the areas of review in researching the golf industry and maybe looking at alternative ideas for the park. There really was not another recreation or sport that stood out. A lot of the other sports are also kind of in the same boat as golf, in that not as many people are playing, not as many people are participating in recreation and leisure activities in general. So we thought it might be a good idea to complete a community needs assessment to kind of ask what people would be looking for in a park. I know the master plan is also being talked about and in the works, so we can get a layout of the whole park. Looking at marketing and ways to increase that, possibly revisiting the fee schedule, not just for the green fee prices, but also to simplify it. I know currently there's a lot of different twilight fees, super twilight, all different fees, and it can get kind of confusing. Also evaluating the food concessionaire contract. The contract is expired, so looking at ways that we can possibly renew that with any kind of investment or incentives from the concessionaire. Ways to increase tournaments and ways to increase pro shop sales.
And one thing that I would like to add as well is when we're looking at the master plan of looking the alternatives to the park, it does not only just include, it includes all county parks. It would be looking at assessments throughout the whole community, looking at what every park can offer throughout the county.
And ways to manage expenditures. Reclaimed water is also being used is already being used in the park. And then possibly restructuring the workforce as vacancies become available, what we can do there.
And today we're not asking for any action. We wanted to present this information, but we want you to know that Veronica is already working with her team on several of the areas, like the marketing. We have an asset within the Parks and Special Events, or Parks and Recreation Department, specifically to help us do more communication and marketing. That's what, and she's done a really good job. I look forward to more marketing of the golf course, and we may need to do some more advertising of the golf course. They're revisiting the fee schedule. As you saw on the list, we are the lowest cost golf course, but there's some things that we might be able to evaluate there, like what is the right price point where it's still attractive, but it helps recover some of our costs. The food concessionaire, while the contract is expired, that is one area where we actually, I've talked to Commissioner Stout's office, Commissioner Leon, you and I have spoken a little bit about the food concessionaire there. We actually get little to no complaints about the food concessionaire, but we need to look at the contract. We're working with purchasing on moving forward on food concessionaires for the county in general. and what's the best way to do that, because as you know, we've gone out multiple times. Like for example, at the sports park, it's the same concessionaire. And we've gone out multiple times and had very little response, or nothing that was really different from what we've been doing. So we're looking at different ways we could do that. The tournaments, I think, as we continue to be progressive, we're already seeing more relationships being formed to attract tournaments. And then the pro shop, that is one thing. I've been to both the Painted Dunes and our pro shop. And the Painted Dunes Pro Shop does have, ours is getting better, but the Painted Dunes does have a nice pro shop with nice merchandise available that I think is attractive to golfers. So anyway, my point is we're working on all of this, and it will be something that will be rolled into the master planning for parks.
That was the one question I had, Betsy, is how we fare when it comes to tournaments. If we're behind the ball when it comes to that, if that is relatively lucrative for any of these golf courses to have tournaments. And so that would be information that I think might be helpful too in the future, to look at why they're going to other locations, and if we can start to draw them into our park.
And something we need to work on that same note, some golf courses have a lot more flexibility, especially when they're privately ran, like a municipal course that's privately ran. The municipal or the private company can, on a whim, they really want to attract a tournament away from another course, or they really want to attract a large tournament. They can negotiate and throw in things that we have a very structured set fee schedule, and we don't have that flexibility. It's something that we need to write up some guidelines and policies that allow us to have some of that flexibility. So, for example, if I go to Butterfield and I say, I want to have a tournament here, and I'm going to bring in, we're going to fill up the course, we're going to bring in lots of teams, but I want you to also provide a gift certificates for drawings. I want you to provide buckets for range practice for a day before the tournament, whatever. They can negotiate that. We don't have that flexibility right now. And so we need to work on how we can get that flexibility.
Commissioner? Betsy, you mentioned marketing. I go by the loop, the border highway in the back every day. And to me, there's thousands of cars. I don't know what the count is, but much more than on the Delta side. And we've spoken about a certain area that's going to be reconditioned. That is ripe for some sort of billboard, a nice billboard, reminding people that that's there, and we have what do you call them, twilight and super twilight. It's just something that would draw them, because you just go, there's a big wall, which doesn't look bad, but like we say, we're redoing a portion of it, and I think it'd be. What other place would be more ideal than that? So
Veronica's favorite lot on the backside as well is what you're talking about. Like we could have a billboard there instead of what we currently have there.
Yeah. And by the way, just for transparency, what we currently have there is trash. So instead of drivers seeing trash, they're going to be looking at a good ad.
Right.
It's gone.
Well, just one of the things I do want to add is that I want to thank you all for the great job that you all are doing there at the golf course. It is the only golf course in El Paso where everyone from all over the city goes to learn how to play golf. We have the First Tee program. It is the home of the First Tee, the only home of the First Tee in El Paso. They do sometimes teach lessons at Butterfield or at the Fort Bliss. It's nothing compared to what they teach at Ascarate. They see at the 1,100 kids per year. 420 non-repetitive. The one time 420 that come from all over the city, and just talking with Christy now, I want to bring the kids from the county into the golf course so that they have this experience. If they never in their life get to experiences, they will experience it through us, through the Parks and Recreation Department there at the Ascarate Golf Course. But everywhere throughout the city, everybody learns to play golf at Ascarate Golf Course, and that's something that we do have that no other golf course has, that we want to promote.
Any other questions, commissioners? We appreciate the presentation and the time you took to put it together. There's a lot of information. It was very comprehensive, so thank you.
This is Laura's first presentation since she started.
Good job.
Yeah, you
County
were
as
great.
of February, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, are you okay with going ahead and taking item 4, or did you want to wait on that? I didn't know if you were, so I know you had a time.
I'm okay. I guess I'm okay, yes.
Yes, sir.
Huh? I wanted to make sure Joel would be here. He has another meeting.
He's here.
Item number 4, receive an updated performance report regarding the 2018 strategic plan and provide input on the draft 2019 strategic plan.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. So we have 2 separate items, and I think there might be some confusion because there's 2 separate items in your backup. This PowerPoint is talking about our FY 2018 strategic plan that we're currently working on. The next item I'm going to go over, and the next item we're going to talk about is the action agenda, which is a draft for the 2019 strategic plan. I've already seen a couple corrections on that one that we're going to talk about, and want to get your approval to move forward with a couple changes before we bring it back for a final adoption. And then that one will go is actually supposed to align with our FY19 budget. This year our facilitator did take some of the current activities that we're working on already and folded them into the FY19 plan so that it would track all consecutively all the work being done on the specific item. But we'll talk about that shortly. But this is the 2018 strategic plan overview. And when we're going to talk about some percentages on this, I do want to clarify that is, if there were 4 steps for this specific item, and we've completed one of the 4 steps, we're calling it 25% complete. That 25% complete may have been the largest step of all 4, and the next 3 may move more rapidly. Or if we're at 75% complete and we still have 1 more step, and it may be the longest step or the most involved step, and so it's not necessarily an element of time, it's the steps involved. What percentage of the steps involved have been completed. So of course, the Commissioners Court has set a vision for the county to be a leading binational community, a vibrant community with a dynamic, diverse economy, a world-class center for health, and entertainment for all. Our goals are having a financially sound government, having a strong, growing economy, being a professional, effective organization, and having a vibrant community. In our plan, as you know, there's both a policy agenda and a management agenda. So some of the top priorities on the policy agenda include the jail facility study. The jail facility study. That is in progress. It's 20% complete at this moment, but the next step should move more rapidly. We are working on the RFP for the study is in purchasing review process. Our future water supply and system plan, that is now 100% complete because the court changed direction. There was going to be a second element when we were going to look at continuing our water, staying in the water business, but we discussed that the county is looking at going a different direction as far as the water and wastewater business. And so the section of the plan was to renegotiate our wholesale agreement and to adopt a new rate and to implement it, and all 3 of those things have been completed. And so that section's 100% complete. The PR bond collection direction, that's 50% complete. The county economic incentives policy and funding, 100% complete. Mission Trail Master Plan, it's in progress. It's 25% complete, but the next step should move more rapidly. The initial getting the scope was a time-consuming portion, and now it will move more rapidly. The Public Works Organizational Structure Assessment Report and Action Plan is 100% complete. And the Investment Policy and Portfolio, this one is 66% complete. We did have a change in this one. We are issuing the RFP, in the process of issuing the RFP to get an investment advisor on board. And then once they're on board, we've updated our policy, We also want the advisor to come in and look at our policy and give us additional suggestions on it. And we would make any additional changes based on that input and recommendations to the court and the court's approval of those. Then high priorities in the policy agenda include the Downtown Heritage Survey and Master Plan. Our steps in that are 80% complete. The reentry program for state inmates, 60% complete. Jail population management is 75% complete. Pretrial supervision expansion, we're at 50% on that. Auditing performance assessment and plan, this is 33% complete. This is the one that we've discussed. We're moving towards an internal controls analysis. And on this one, we're working with the auditor. He wants to add some sections to that RFP so that he can receive, as part of this plan, he can receive an analysis for himself on his internal operations and some suggestions and help on policies and procedures. So we've pushed the timeline back a little bit in order to allow the auditor's office to add those elements into the RFP. So when you go out together, we think we'll get a better pricing and a better product if we work together on that. Fabens Airport Business Master Plan. This is 33% complete, and we're also doing this one slightly different than originally put into the plan. Originally, it was put in a plan that we would work with UTEP on this, and we do still plan to work with UTEP on a master plan. However, they've asked, and they've asked to delay, and they're not ready to do their portion because they're still working on what all kinds of programs they can bring in, and they feel like that'll be a significant impact to the plan. So in the meantime, we're working on our own business master plan for our segment of the airport and on the layout of the airport. So as you know, we've received grant funding and we are moving forward. We have grant funding and bond funding to use to do our own segment master plan for the business master plan for the airport and the layout. So that one, we're at 33% complete.
Betsy, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
On the fencing, I know that we received part of the grant was to start on the fencing. Have we started any portion of it yet?
I don't know off the top of my head, sir. I'll have to get you an answer on that. I don't know if we were going to wait for the plan first or if we were going to go ahead and proceed with the fencing. So I'll get you an answer back on that one. Okay, jury selection process. This one is in progress. Commissioner Leon has been working on this one. He's doing some outreach, working with the judiciary on how to expedite. Also, it's something I've also, at Commissioner Leon's request, been discussing with the Sheriff's Office about things that we could do at the entrances on jury days to help expedite egress and ingress into the building. Existing county regional parks plan. This is the planning for our existing parks. It's 50% complete. We do have steps continuing on this one, and we'll be requesting again to do some more master planning. Road maintenance, service level, and funding, that's 100% complete. And then the neighborhood associations framework, it's 10% complete now. We are in the process of hiring a planning and development director, and they're a key component to moving this forward. On the management agenda, our paving projects, which were top priority, are 100% complete. The water wholesale agreement and additional water allocation is 100% complete. The cybersecurity plan and resources. This is in progress, but we are actually, IT is in the process of integrating this. It's being integrated into the technology master plan. So we would ask, and the technology master plan is already part of the strategic plan. We would ask that it not be pulled out of the technology master plan and it just be integrated as part of that overall master planning for IT. Employee compensation, policy direction, and funding. The court gave us this policy direction and funded this in this fiscal year, so it's now 100% complete. The federal mandates, monitoring, analysis, and policy direction is 100% complete. And the investment zones promotion is 100% complete. That will be ongoing. Economic development continues to promote those zones, but it is complete, what was in the goal. Our subdivision regulations, this is 10% complete. We do expect it to move more quickly once this first phase was completed. Let's see. The business retention and expansion plan was 100% complete. The courts adopted and approved that, and it's been implemented. The county website upgrade is 100% complete. We're all still learning to live through the new website. Well, it looks beautiful. It is different, and we are all having to adjust. Our mercury issues, these are 90% complete. We're in a testing phase of the. We implemented what is the suggested correction from one of our contractors, and we're now testing to make sure it's working.
And that's entirely at the
medical examiner's office. Yes, sir. Judicial metrics, this is 100% complete for the ones that were in this year's plan. It's an ongoing process, but the ones that we identified, the measures we identified this year, are 100% complete. Criminal Justice Department assessment report, this is 90% complete. We are in implementation phase, and we're going to report back to you on how things are working. That's our final step in this one. Economic Development Corporation, this direction is 100% complete, and the direction was that we could not basically, in the current structure, form these under the county. And so that is 100% complete. Information Technology Master Plan implementation is 60% complete. We had several other priorities that weren't high or top priority. I wasn't going to go through each of these individually, but they are provided. There are some of them that we have had timing issues, and we're recommending some changes. So, for example, the long-term debt plan. Wally has requested that we move that, continue working on it, but move some of the dates forward to 2018, 2019. They're working at overlaying the presentation that Norma gave you all on our capital assets and our infrastructure needs over the next several years, to overlay that with the debt plan so we know when our high cost needs are and when our bonding capacity is available, what funding is available. So they're still working on that. Another one we're asking is the fixed routes modification. We're recommending deleting this as it is part of the regional transit feasibility study, which is already listed in the plan. So it's like we had duplicated the listing. Let's see, there was another one. There's two other ones. Economic development contract with the city. We are no longer in an interlocal with the city for economic development, as you're aware. So that one is no longer applicable. And then also the one on a regional economic binational strategy. We are still working and looking at this in doing it through other avenues, but the original goal was to work with the chamber and Borderplex. We've met with them multiple times. They were not interested. So now we're looking at what other ways can we pursue binational coordination.
Betsy, on the jail medical contract, where are we with that? I know that there was a trip taken to evaluate other procedures.
Sure.
And we're looking at UMC, but also looking outside of that to see if there's a better option.
So right now, I will tell you, the sheriff and I have talked about it since we've been meeting with UMC regularly. And UMC is doing a very thorough, very comprehensive analysis of what it will take for them to come in and not only provide the current services, but provide some of the services that we are currently having to go out to get, and also to set up more of a model like we saw in Tarrant County. In Tarrant County, there's more internal services, so you don't have to go out for so much specialty care. And where that would save us is probably not necessarily in the cost of the care, but in we won't be transporting prisoners, which is always a risk, and it is also a staff demand on the sheriff's office. So it's a way we could become more efficient in our own operations. So they are working through, they're very, very close to having a final proposal. I expect the final proposal within the next 2 to 3 weeks from UMC to us. In the meantime, we have the consultant working on an RFP to look at going out to getting a TPA, as doing it through that method. The more we're working with UMC, the more I see the viability in that option and that it could be very effective for us. And we may not need to continue that RFP process. Even though we'll have a draft RFP, that draft RFP would also help us make sure we've covered all those services in with UMC. So what all's in that RFP would be things that we'd be looking for UMC to provide as well. But they're doing a very comprehensive proposal to us, and it's really working well. They've done additional tours outside of the tours we've done. They've toured our own facilities. They've done a real thorough staff analysis. So I think we're looking at a potential positive outcome with UMC. Let's see, so those all are items that are also in the other priorities in the plan. It's a pretty comprehensive plan with, I think there's approximately, I counted them up this week, but I want to say there's about 60 priorities in our plan. We also have the management and progress in major projects. So anything with a star is complete, but these are just other operational matters that departments are in the process of working on. So anything with a check mark has significant progress. That's actually supposed to be progress, not significant process. Please forgive us. And then anything with a star is 100% complete. Anything with an arrow, it's something that's moving forward or continuing. But I will tell you, even since I last compiled this update, some of these items have either made more significant progress or even been completed. So we continue to track these and I continue to meet with departments once a quarter to get updates on these. And these, again, this continues. There's approximately 76 of these. And then these are the major projects that we had in the plan as well. You'll see that some of them are 100% complete. Some of them are still in progress. Some of them are, like, for example, the Vista de Este water system repair. That's in the procurement process now. All of these are ongoing. Desert acceptance, the street lighting is 100% complete, but it will continue to be ongoing as we add street lights every year. And then the road paving will go into effect. We don't want to do that until after we get the wastewater system completed. So that would be the next step, would be the road paving.
And one thing that was left out there is the actual road identification, the street signs. We had no street signs, and the ones that we did have were sun-drenched, where you couldn't even see the name.
Yes,
so
sir.
It's all 100%.
Yes, sir. And so that's it in a nutshell. We close with our team pride and service statement. This is the values that the county follows in all of our projects and all the work we do. And the progress we've made would not be possible without our department heads and our team members embracing these. I mean, their commitment to the pride statement is important, and it's how we get these things done. And so, and everybody, I think, who is part of the strategic initiatives this year that have specific action items are here today in case you have any questions on the 2018 plan. And of course, this continues, we'll continue to make progress. And as you, also in the 2018 plan, our plans are not specific to a fiscal year, even though that we normally implement them by fiscal year, because some of the steps go on and their scheduled dates to continue beyond the fiscal year because it'll take us longer to complete the projects. All the steps. Okay, then the next one, is there any questions on that before I go to the 2019? Ollie, can you change me over to the 2019 action agenda? Okay, this is the draft for the 2019 strategic plan. There are a couple areas in there. We're still refining dates, going through and looking at the steps that were discussed with the court. But there is one area that we just discussed briefly as a part of the 2018 plan that I wanted to bring your attention to, as we will be recommending a correction to it. Can you just page me down with the you're gonna go to page, I think it's page 5. I'm sorry, page 8. Right there. Okay, so on this item, the future water wastewater business direction. Again, in this one, we've already completed all of section A, and now section B has been changed. And so I'd like to go through what section B is supposed to be based on our previous discussions. So the first step would be research options to divest water system and collect interest from El Paso Water Utility. Then the next one would be El Paso Water Utility response, present to court, and then implement if approved. So those would be the steps under the county business of the water system, water and wastewater. That's when we'd like to incorporate a change before we bring it back for adoption. And then, let's see, there's other items throughout that we would work on updating dates, and also on this particular one, the downtown administration building, parking lot, and facilities. We've talked about evaluating properties, negotiating prices. I also think that there might be some other options, a couple other options the court may want to consider, and we would discuss that at our next strategic planning meeting later in July. But we're working on all of the options, but it may change this goal slightly depending on what direction the court provides. So those are a couple areas where we still expect to have some changes. And I didn't know, then there's some typo corrections that we will go through here. We received this from the facilitator. There's still a couple typos where it says, for example, it says hire consultant. It's supposed to say hire and it says fire consultant. So we want to make that correction.
So you're trying to send us a sign.
Maybe. And then also on the judicial metrics, there's an error in that one where it says, give me just a second. There it is. It says development for measures S and B. It's actually develop elements for measures 6 and 5. 6 is the file reliability and integrity measure, and then measure 5 is the juror utilization. So those are the ones that we have completed. So those kinds of corrections. Oh, and right here it says trash date. I don't know where that came from, but that's another correction we would make.
So when do you anticipate bringing this back to the court, Betsy, for final adoption?
We could bring it back within the next couple weeks. The only thing that will still be in flux will be the direction we receive from the. I'd like to make the building parking lot acquisition a little more broad, like discuss various options, get direction from the court. So I'll make that, but we won't know what the specific direction will be in the steps that will be required after that direction. But we'll put some placeholders in there for that.
Maybe I missed some meetings. I don't remember discussing making a priority creating an amphitheater at the Coliseum.
Studying the amphitheater.
This is saying to reserve funds in the budget.
For the study.
I don't remember this
conversation. That was in January. It was discussed in January that you all asked that we study that option. And it wasn't at that Coliseum. It was at the same time we discussed the study of the Coliseum.
I don't know why I thought that was a discussion during the discussion of the park master plan.
It was
to evaluate that being a part of the
park. There was a discussion from the UTEP presentation about putting an amphitheater there, a small amphitheater. We discussed a larger amphitheater and the demand and studying whether there was the demand and need with the different venues that are available. And we talked about at the same time we talked about the Coliseum, but it's not necessarily linked to the Coliseum.
Looks like it here.
We discussed it at the same time. So he's saying go out and do it. What we discussed was doing a study, both of the demand for having a Coliseum and an amphitheater. Like what market would we most likely attract between the Coliseum and if we also added an amphitheater?
And there's also opportunities for private-public financing as we go through the study.
Not to read this enough already before we start voting on stuff. We're adding to this without us having a conversation.
And this isn't committing the county to build or do an amphitheater. It's committing the county to study whether an amphitheater would be supported in this market. And if so, what size, and then identifying potential locations depending on the size. I know Mr. Kennedy has talked about with the demolishing. Good morning. Of the area, the animal control center, like what that opens up, what opportunities might be available.
Can you address that? I'm very interested in that. Mr. Kennedy, would you be able to address the possibilities of the amphitheater?
I mean, stand in front of this.
You have to sit down. Yeah.
Okay.
Just state your name for the record.
Brian Kennedy, almost gave the wrong title, CEO of the El Paso Sports Commission. We have actually, from our end, started looking at, once that land is cleared, that we're clearing, if there's a possibility of putting that, and we're looking at what traveling acts there would be available to do there. The parking lot itself can hold about 14,000 to 15,000 people if we were to lose the barns in the back. We've already done the square footage check on that. We're trying to find out what, there is an amphitheater in town, McKelligan Canyon. It is not busy, but I don't know if that's because of a lack of traveling shows or a lack of information by some of the promoters. So we're doing our own check right now just to find out if we think it would be viable to start putting amphitheater type shows out there on outdoor stages to see what would then happen as kind of a test run before money was put into the infrastructure. But that land, the biggest problem would be busing for parking, which we've already looked at. But there is a possibility that with the utilities that are currently where the animal shelter is because they're all stubbed out, you already have electric, water, sewer. On our property, that would be the location, would be right there because it's a lot less infrastructure you have to put in.
Can you touch on the possibility of private-public financing?
There are some people I know that have done this, Rosewood did it, a couple other people across Texas have done it with private and publics because it becomes the revenue from that would be designated then to repayment of both the county and the private partner. And they can see that as a potential profit. I wanted to make sure before a private partner was brought to the potential private partner was brought to the table that I was comfortable with what the numbers would be to see if it would work. But there are a couple of amphitheaters across Texas that have done just that, have done private-public partnerships. I know Live Nation has a couple of amphitheaters that they're running themselves.
Brian, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So those are, again, we have some date corrections to go through, and then a couple other spelling, typo corrections, but we'd be ready to bring it back in the next couple weeks for court's consideration.
Other questions?
Thanks for all your work on it. I know this has been quite an undertaking. So,
Yeah.
I mean, thanks for.
Actually, it's our department heads. I mean, they really make sure, on top of, nobody receives something specific to work on strategic plan initiatives. And I go back to 10 years ago when I started, and, at the time, the county didn't have like some real set goals to get us from where we were today to moving forward. And so the Commissioners Court adopting this provides us great direction. And then our team working on it and making it happen is just, it's inspiring to see the work they do.
Good job.
Thank you for everything you guys have done. I mean, seeing those percentages for this year's plan is really encouraging. I think we're even starting to work on some of the stuff for next year. So
yes,
this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So no action on that item.
This brings us to item number 5, the addendum to the agenda. Discussion regarding the use of the El Paso County Jail for the detention of migrants.
And I think there was a request from Commissioner Stout to consider deleting and postponing the item until July 9th. So I don't know if anybody on the court would like to make that motion to do that. I'm going to leave it to the rest of the court, but I'm okay with having the discussion. Wanted to put that out there.
I spoke with Commissioner Stout this morning just on scheduling matters, he did tell me that he would like the discussion to be postponed, but I told him since there's people that are going to be present for the discussion, I felt it was prudent to continue, but that if there was any further action that the court would move it to when he returns. Okay.
So there's the items, Commissioner, which one would you like up first? There's the
this one here. And here's hard copies of it. Yeah. And, you guys see each first. There's a few handouts. I mean, there's for media, which is it's essentially a copy of the backup and then an article that appeared in today's New York Times. Thank you, Judge and Commissioners. I just wanted to start a discussion about the detention of migrants in the county jail. We've all seen, I think all of us have been bothered by the administration's policies, particularly when it pertains to child separation. The court recently took action regarding that policy, and rightly so. El Paso County has really, I guess, been on the front lines of this issue, and we currently have people from all over the country who are here covering the story as it continues to unfold. Over the weekend, I was continuing to follow this issue, and perhaps some of you all saw there were approximately 32, I want to say, Central American migrants that were released to Annunciation House over the weekend. And they had, I think, a couple press conferences, and there were some migrants who shared their stories about being, since their time arriving to the United States and their treatment here in the United States. There were about 22 of those 32 migrants were detained in our county facility, and I found that concerning. And the following day, I decided to put this item up for discussion, and that's why it's an addendum to today's agenda. But after hearing those stories of those migrants, I wanted to have the discussion with the court to see if this was really the intention of the contract that we have with the federal government, with the U.S. Marshals, to detain immigrants on this scale. So I had my staff research the numbers after this issue was brought up last year, I wasn't tracking the number of federal inmates in our facilities. So we decided to just go ahead and update the information as best as we could. So if you'll see on the larger colored PDF here that you have with the infograph, that's really in a nutshell where we stand currently as it pertains to the detention of migrants. Since the Trump administration's policy took effect, approximately 90% of all the federal inmates in our county facility are there for some sort of immigration-related offense. A year ago, when this issue was examined, that number was in around the 70% range. So we've seen an increase not only in the percentage of immigrants that are in the county jail, but we've also seen an increase in the number of federal inmates who are there currently. Last year, our average daily population was approximately 650 federal inmates. That number jumped to just under 1,000, and at its peak was at 1,052. So the first infograph, it graphically shows how many 90% of all federal inmates in the county jail are facing immigration-related charges. Of those 90%, 2 out of the 3 federal inmates face first-time immigration charges. And I think that's an important number that I think needs to be talked about. 2 out of 3 are first-time offenders. These are migrants that are crossing over into the United States for the first time and are charged with a federal misdemeanor. And then just to show you the scale of how many immigrants we have in our county facilities, the number of immigrants or the number of federal inmates in our jail roughly equal 95% of the downtown jail, just to imagine just how many people we, relative to our jail population as a whole. The second line graph just demonstrates where it shows the graphical increase of the federal inmate population from where it was at the beginning of the year in January to where it is now since the administration started its policy on child separation. One of the key things that's important for people to keep in mind is that a lot of these inmates who have gone into the county jail now were not previously detained in the county facility. People who were crossing over into the United States, the vast majority of them were previously charged civilly. So if somebody came in as a family unit, if somebody had children, they were not detained in facilities such as the El Paso County Jail. Since the administration changed course and took on this awful, atrocious policy of separating children from the migrants, that enabled those parents to be charged criminally, and they were then under the responsibility of the U.S. Marshals, and they were then allowed to be incarcerated in our county jail. And if you hear the stories of the migrants who were at Annunciation House this weekend, many of them describe the detention in the county jail, and they talk about how long they were in the facility. I believe Annunciation House put out some numbers about the length of detention of these migrants, and I think the longest length of stay was 40 days, the shortest length of stay was 10 days. And so many of the people that are under detention in the county jail are staying there for a prolonged period of time. A few points that I want to highlight. I firmly believe that the detention of migrants goes against our values as a county and as a community. We have made significant strides in the area of criminal justice. And one of the tenets that we are really pushing forward with, and thanks to the work of everybody here, is that we have made every effort on behalf from law enforcement to the county and supervision, criminal justice, the DAs and the judges, to not incarcerate people who are facing nonviolent offenses. And it's important to note that because we have made significant strides in helping to reduce our jail population here locally. We do not believe here at the county that people should be incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. It's wrong, and there's been litigation across this throughout the country, but it doesn't serve any purpose to detain people who don't pose a risk to our public safety. Jail should be reserved for the most violent offenders in our community, and that is a commitment that we have made here at El Paso County. The people who are being charged under the federal contract are being charged with federal misdemeanors. Again, 65%, 66% are not there for any sort of violent offense. And when you add on the individuals who have come in the second time into our country, that number goes to about 85% of people in the jail are there for non-violent offenses. And I have really taken issue with the prolonged systemic incarceration of people, and I think we have to really take a look at who is being served under this contract, and the fact that the overwhelming majority of people that are facing incarceration are nonviolent offenders, I think warrants further discussion of this contract. Since they are facing, to put it in perspective, I mean, they are facing federal misdemeanors. If they were here in our country and if they were going through the county's system, and if these people were citizens, they would not be incarcerated under our county system. We would release them because they don't pose a risk to public safety. And the reason why I raise this is because it sort of puts us in a difficult position, because what is the justification for us incarcerating them? If the federal government is choosing to pursue this course of family separations and now charging people with criminal offenses, I mean, is this something that we as a county believe in? And I strongly believe the answer is no. We have taken a strong stance against incarcerating people who don't pose a risk to our community. And again, to suggest otherwise, that we should be incarcerating these migrants, it somehow suggests that they pose a risk to public safety. And I think we have suggested, here at the county, that we have made very clear, whether it came down to SB4, we always talk about that we are the safest city in the country. We always talk about that, statistics have shown that immigrants in the country don't, commit less crimes than when compared to citizens. And so I think it's important to remember this as we're discussing this, because again, it's such an awful practice, I think, what we're engaging in incarcerating such a large number of people who do not pose a risk to this community, who are facing federal misdemeanors, and it's something that I think needs to be discussed.
A quick question.
I'll take questions. The second issue I want to bring to your attention, this morning, there was an article that was released that the New York Times published. I included it in the printed out package. It wasn't as part of the backup. There are cities across this country who are taking active steps to not participate in these types of contracts, given the current environment where families are being separated, and there is a ramped up effort to detain and prosecute migrants. And so you'll see from this article, it was just published this morning, that there are various cities, Sacramento County in California, they ultimately terminated a contract that they were getting paid for. They were getting paid $6.6 million annually to keep undocumented immigrants. Williamson County here in Texas, just north of Austin, where Dell is located, they were operating a women's facility that was leased to hold up to 400 women inmates at one time. They ultimately decided it was in the best interest of the county to terminate that contract. In Springfield City, in Oregon, they also terminated the contract. Josephine County, also in Oregon, also terminated a contract. And in Atlanta, I recall seeing another article where Atlanta also took steps to terminate the contract they had because they do not believe, again, in incarcerating these individuals. When we look at the scope and the magnitude of our incarceration here in El Paso County, you can take a look at this list here. I don't think this was in the back. This is just another list for your information, but it lists all the county facilities in Texas. And El Paso County is by far the largest incarcerator of federal inmates and the largest incarcerator of migrants in the state of Texas. We house over 25% of the state's migrants who are being detained by the U.S. Marshals. We house the largest in the state of Texas, 25%. I cannot find another county or local government, I cannot find another municipal or county government in the United States that has a contract as large as the contract that we have with the U.S. Marshals. And so again, it's just, I think we have to ask, is this something that we really want to be engaged in? The large scale of migrants, the large scale detention of migrants in our community. Again, I cannot find any other example where there is a county that is engaged in such a massive enterprise of mass incarceration. Nowhere in the country. It's also important to underscore under this point that
is it the country or the state?
Both. Here's the state list, so you can see all the entities in the state. We exceed both public and private jails, but I also did a search for contracts throughout the nation. I could not find one that is remotely close to the contract that we are engaged in the United States. I bring this up because it's important to note that I think some have suggested that we are engaged in this practice because we have to be. There has to be a level of cooperation with the federal government, and that is simply not the case. This contract is voluntary. We are voluntarily doing this, and we are generating, we have a revenue contract where we generate $25 million from this practice. And so when it comes to other things like SB4, we're required to collaborate on other things such as honoring ICE detainers. So that's not something that we're afforded to where we can just say, now under SB4, where we can no longer not detain folks who are under an ICE detainer. But when it comes to individuals on a contract basis, this is a voluntary contract, and we are voluntarily incarcerating these people because we are choosing to. It's also been suggested, and this is one of the points that I hear about this, that this was brought up last year when this issue was raised, and I've heard some folks say it again. It's been suggested that migrants in our facility receive better access to services, that they have better access to services such as the federal public defender, the consulate, and others. My staff and I spent several hours going over a year's worth of logs at the county jail and at the annex, at the downtown jail and at the annex, to see if that was true. From our observation, it's not. Given the magnitude of the number of inmates that are there, you will see approximately 18 visits a week, from anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours where there are visitations. The logs at the county jail are different. The ones at the annex are a little bit more detailed, where it requires the individual to put in their agency. But the logs at the downtown facility also note who is a federal public defender. But from our observation and combing through hundreds of pages of logs, we cannot see any sort of anything to suggest that migrants in our facility are somehow receiving better representation than those who are detained at other facilities. We saw no increase. The number of consulate visits was minimal. There was only a few sprinkled throughout 100 pages, several hundred pages, but we could not find anything to suggest that people in this facility are receiving better access to services. Even if it were the case that we were to find that that was true, that people in our county facility were receiving better services, which they're not, I refuse to believe that incarceration is the best policy within our sphere of influence to help those that are fleeing violence and persecution. Or I also refuse to believe that we're engaged in some sort of humanitarian effort of mass incarceration and we're doing immigrants some good by detaining them. I refuse to believe that. It is within our power to do good, and I refuse to believe that when we look back at this moment also in history and we're asked what did we do, that our response will simply be we jailed them a little bit better. That cannot, that must not, and that should not be our response. If the court ultimately decides that it wants to continue this pursuit of mass incarceration of migrants, the largest of any county in the country, the largest of any county in the state of Texas, then I would urge the court to consider a couple of options. One, I would urge the court to consider amending the contract to where we will continue to voluntarily house federal inmates, but let's not detain migrants who are nonviolent offenders or who are here for nonviolent offenses. I think that's something that we should consider as a court. If the court still chooses to house migrants, I would urge the court to consider then giving some of the proceeds that we generate from the detention of migrants to those who are, I believe, truly trying to serve their most basic needs. Annunciation House is doing tremendous work in trying to help these families, help them to find their children, which I think, God bless them for what they do. But there are people who are really undertaking a lot of good work on behalf of migrants, and I think it is really that work that we should really be engaged in. It's that work that we should help encourage and that we should focus on. Is if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to send a message that we will not stand for this type of policy, if we really want to say that we are opposed to the separation of families, we are opposed to the separation of child separation policy, that we oppose mass incarceration, well, let's really take it a step further and let's help those agencies that are actually engaged in this work. I'll close with this and I'll open it up for questions. I know that there's a lot of people here that want to speak. When I was in college, I would often study at the university's law campus in Washington. And the law school's campus, their motto was, "Law is but the means, justice is the end." The people that we are detaining are not receiving justice. The people we are detaining are not receiving justice. They are being separated from their children. They are being incarcerated for prolonged periods of time, and the vast majority of them will be deported. We are facilitating this process that I think is inhumane, I think is unjust. And if we are going to stay true to our county's values, if we're going to stay true to the resolution that we just passed, and if we're going to stay true, I think, to what this community believes in, I do not believe that we should be engaging or facilitating this effort. I sincerely hope that we do not continue with the status quo. I don't believe we should be engaged in this effort. But if the Commissioners Court continues to decide to, I hope it will at least consider the options that I've outlined of either amending the contract or giving some of the proceeds that we generate. The 25 million, we saw from the auditor's presentation today, the revenue increase was, or the revenue from services provided is now up to 32 million from the slide that we just saw today. Again, it's beyond what any other county in this country is doing.
I don't know if the court wants to ask questions or speak, or if you want to hear from the sheriff first.
My only issue, and again, it is not our job to get involved in immigration. It's not our role. Here's my issue. You have made no secret over the years you're not a fan of this project, this contract. Not a secret. A year ago, you came up with your own numbers and your own study because you didn't like all the other studies that said what you wanted to say. And you've done the same thing today. You literally say the source material of your information is you. You're quoting yourself as your source. I don't think I could get away with that in college if I was writing a report, and I don't think we should get away with it here. There are 254 counties in the state of Texas. You are comparing us against counties that have under 10,000 people in the entire county's population to prove your point. You're making the numbers look the way you want them to look. I'm not saying that there's issues that need to be corrected. My problem is you are presenting this in a way that makes it look the way you want it to look. And to compare El Paso, when I Google El Paso, and it comes with over 800,000 people in the population, and then when I Google Ward, which is the one that you want to use as your example, it has a population of 10,658 for the county. You last year tried to get rid of this contract based on numbers. You were voted down 4-1. Now I think you're just trying to do the same thing with emotions. And I take issue with that. I think you're using the current situation to try to put a brand new spin on the story you've been trying to tell. And my belief, I could be wrong, I'm not saying I'm not. My problem is I don't see the big counties on this list. Of course we are going to be the largest person who's holding them because we're the largest county next to the border where they're coming across. It makes sense. This is where the courts are. This is where the people are coming out over. Why would we ship them to Houston and somewhere else if they're going to bring them right back here anyway? I understand what you're saying. I understand it needs to be fixed. But I also don't think El Paso County is the one going to fix it. My problem is when you're comparing El Paso County's jail to Ward County's jail, to Dimmitt County's jail, which has less than 10,000 people, to B County, which has less than 30,000 people, I think you're using an unfair comparison model to prove your point, and that's where I have an issue.
If I may respond, Commissioner, I know the numbers seem shocking, but let me just say, well, first of all, our job is policymakers, and our job is to research data, and that's all that I've done. The numbers that are here are not sourced through me. They are attributed to the Texas Commission on Jail Standards, where we submit our daily population. And so the list before you, as shocking as it is not a comparison. That is the exhaustive list of every county in Texas that is engaged in incarceration of federal inmates. As shocking as it is, the only thing it is that I've done is I've sorted them from highest to lowest of all the counties. That's it. I mean, if you want to say that's manipulation of data, this is not a comparison document. That's what I want to make clear. This is an exhaustive document of all the counties in Texas. And I know it seems shocking. I know it seems like, whoa, it's not fair, but those are the numbers. The numbers are the numbers.
County doesn't hold a single immigrant.
they have a contract with Bexar County that is not reported to TCJS.
So just because they don't report it doesn't mean they don't do it.
Well, they're not required to report to TCJS. But see, what is required? The only thing I can only pull public sources of data. So what you're seeing here is everything that is reported to the state of Texas. These are all the county facilities that are operated by county personnel in the state of Texas. This is all of them. Bexar County doesn't use county personnel to detain. But these are all the folks who use county resources to detain federal immigrants and federal detainees. So this is, I just want to be very clear about that. This is not a comparison data where we selectively compare. This is an exhaustive list. And it excludes facilities that lease a building as a whole, but that lease a building and don't staff it. Does that make sense? So,
it's not an apples to apples comparison because you're not including those jails because of.
Well, we can disagree whether or not it's apples, but I will say that these are all the public facilities in Texas that report to TCJS that have federal inmates. We are by far the largest that use county personnel for the detention of federal inmates, and that's not. I mean, it's not disputable. The numbers are what the numbers are. There's no other county that engages in that in their county jails.
I think Commissioner Leon had a question.
Commissioner, just before we get off of what you're talking about as far as the report, my office did a check on, and we went specifically to immigration detainer report, which is it's current as of May 1st of this year. And it's showing Bexar County, Cameron County, Dallas County, Denton County, Fort Bend, Houston, which is Harris County, as holding immigration detainers. They're holding specifically what you're talking about. So I just want to make sure, I'm not saying your numbers are wrong, but this just came out, I just got this week.
What's the number for El Paso?
El Paso is at 88. Okay, as of the date that was printed, the number of inmates is 88. Right. The number of inmate days is 2399.
Okay. And I appreciate that. So let me clarify. So what you're holding in your hand is the number of ICE holds that all public jails in Texas are required to detain. So when somebody in our community is arrested, let's say someone from the sheriff's department arrests somebody for somebody had a taillight that was out, or somebody had maybe it was a domestic violence dispute. They go and they arrest that individual on a state charge, right? Whether it be domestic violence, speeding. The federal government then comes in and says, hey, of these state inmates, we want to hold these individuals because we think that there might be an immigration violation here. So that is a separate list of inmates who are under an ICE hold. All counties in Texas are required to that's actually separate. So El Paso's numbers would be in addition to the 875 that's on this list, because these are exclusively contract inmates with the U.S. Marshals. People who are on ICE holds are not under the supervision of the U.S. Marshals yet. Once they become federal inmates, then they will go from the county's supervision and responsibility into the contract and then into the responsibility of the U.S. Marshals. But those are people who are in county jails facing an ICE detainer, which is separate from people who are facing detention because of an existing contract with the U.S. Marshals. They're two separate and distinct populations.
And I see what you're saying, but to me, this is more apples to apples, where it really shows this is the detainer report. It's in black and white, and it compares us to all 254 counties in Texas. But it's just something that I just wanted to clarify in my mind a little bit before we got deeper into it.
And unfortunately, under SB 4, we don't have the ability to change that side of the equation. We have to honor ICE detainers in the community. And unfortunately, that was a consequence of SB 4. We can do something about this. If these counties that were listed here that have an active contract with the U.S. Marshal Service, these contracts can be terminated. So I just want to be clear about that distinction, is that we can't do anything about that, but this is a voluntary contract that's entered into.
And I think something that I've asked you in the past is, of all the detainees we have in our jails, which ones were separated from their family? I just had a conversation with somebody, as I explained to you, last week, that lived in Sanelli, had been living in the U.S. for 15 years, was picked up on a separate offense, found out that he was here without the proper documentation. And so I think the distinction I was trying to form in my own mind is this family wasn't separated because they entered the U.S. illegally 15 years ago. They were separated last week after a 15-year productive life in the U.S. So I'm trying to grapple with those kinds of numbers. But the question that I had for you, out of all the inmates we have that are here on immigration issues, how many of them were separated from their families as they entered the U.S., as opposed to somebody here 15 months, 15 years?
Sure. For purposes of prosecution, the federal federal prosecutors do not maintain, and this has been sort of the tragedy of the child separation policy, and where I think it's going to really create a headache in terms when it comes to reunification. So these folks are now being criminally charged and they're put into the system. For purposes of their prosecution under the criminal offense, there's no notation of whether or not they're parents. And I think that's a tragedy. So when they're going through the court system, we are unable to determine who or how many parents are there because it's not noted. Unfortunately, once they're separated by DHS, the children are transported into the responsibility of HHS, Health and Human Services. And that's been one of the debates, is that there are different agencies involved when it comes to the detention of children, the detention of parents, the prosecution of these parents, that when it comes to the reunification, there's no notation that, these inmates get a receipt for their belongings. There's no sort of documentation that's given that's like, oh, here, we have your child. And I think that's, but there is no way to tell. The only way that we can tell is when people, such as those that were released to Annunciation House, describe their personal experiences. So there were about 22 this weekend that admitted publicly in a press conference that they were detained at the county jail. So it's only through those personal interviews and through their personal experiences that we can, at this point, ascertain that they were parents. But I think it's indisputable at this point, after this weekend's press conference, that these 22 parents were at least detained in our facility. There could be more. I suspect there are a lot more. But they were the ones that were just released into Annunciation House.
But there's no way of finding out whether they were separated from the families at the initial crossing, or if it was a month, 2 months, 20 years. That we don't know.
And perhaps there are people in the audience that know, but from what I saw this weekend, the parents that were at the press conference on Sunday were separated when they came into the border, and then booked into the county jail. So and that was from firsthand accounts at the press conference.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if the federal public defender wouldn't have those numbers. I think I might have asked. I don't have the number in front of me, unfortunately, but I wonder if they have context on that.
In articles that I read, they asked the federal public defenders for that data, and they said that it's not relevant to their prosecution.
I don't know, Ms. Bernal, do you think that there is reason for us to go into executive very briefly to discuss SB4, given any context that you've heard so far, or do you think that we're...
Not based on the conversation so far. I think that SB4 does not require the county to enter into contracts with the federal government with regard to the housing detainees. That's separate from any kind of interference with law enforcement enforcing immigration law. If you have specific questions beyond that, we're happy to brief you more in executive session.
Just to make sure that no comments run afoul of SB4 and what we're talking about.
It's up to you if you'd like to.
I think we're okay. Sheriff, did you want to comment?
Sure. For the record, Richard Wiles, El Paso County Sheriff. And I have to agree with you, Commissioner Haggerty. I think some of these numbers can be misleading, and certainly some of the statements that are made. For instance, in the determination of who is held under the pretrial detainee in the state charges, it's not just non-violent people. It's also people who are considered a flight risk. So both of those are actually taken into account. And in fact, we do house misdemeanor offenses that are not violent awaiting trial. This latest report, which is for June of 2018 from TCJS actually shows us one of the highest state ADPs we've had in a while, 1,622. 125 of those are misdemeanor pretrials, and 53 are misdemeanors convicted serving their time. So that certainly is not correct that we let all violent offenders out the door. The judges have to take into account when setting bond, and the PR people have to take account when granting a PR, whether or not the individual is also a flight risk. In regards to your story from the New York Times, you know, many of these locations that are ending contracts deal with this family situation that unfortunately has occurred here in our nation, and it's a terrible thing, we all agree. Although not everybody agrees. I've been getting a lot of hate mail since I stopped my officers from working at the tent city, but you know, it is what it is. And then the ones that may not be related to the issue of families being separated, we don't really know what other options that community has to hold individuals that are charged with federal immigration crimes. So I really don't know what this tells us. And then you're absolutely right. Bexar County leases their building, a public building that's owned by the county, and to a private company who houses strictly immigration detainees. And they have a capacity of 688. And I don't know what other ones are out there. I know that one's out there because I've actually went and toured that location. So I'm aware of that. So I have to tell you that we just found out about this early in the week. And so, you know, I don't really have a lot of time to kind of put things together. But I do have some information here I'd like to go through just real quickly. If you could pass that around to the commissioners. You can take one too if you need one. I've got some extra copies here. So one thing I want you all to know is that the federal inmate population fluctuates all the time. And its ability to do that is the ability of the beds we have. So our first and primary responsibility is state inmates. So they fill a certain number of beds. And again, as of June the 1st, it was 1,622. And then we keep a cushion where we have empty beds for booking. And then any beds above that, if the federal government needs those beds under the existing contract, we let them bring their inmates in. And so you can tell, and this was a snapshot from June the 1st of 2015, 16, 17, and 18. You can see the federal population went from 507 in 2015 to 894 in 2016 to 694 in 2017 to 875 on June 1st, 2018, and today it's at 674. So it fluctuates all the time. It's been high, it's been low. It's again the availability of beds and where the feds decide to book those inmates. So in one of the charts from Commissioner Pettis, you see a spike there on May the 17th, and I just want you to know that that's really an anomaly. It's you can see the day before it was 979. It spiked up to 1026 and dropped back down to 979. So I don't know. It's on the second page. So I'm not sure exactly how that happened. They could have had some kind of roundup or whatever. But what they typically do is they book inmates into the jail, and then they make arrangements based upon where that inmate would be better suited to stay. They all don't stay here. They ship them to the private jails that are close by or other facilities. And so, and again, on the next page, to kind of give you an idea of the fluctuations of the numbers, I was able to do from June the 1st to June the 26th to kind of give you an idea. You see it's broken down by males and females and the total. So it's in constant flux. We don't hold 900 inmates every day. We've only held over 1,000 one day.
And is that the one that you're referencing right now, that spike?
Right, and it's been higher in the past. As I pointed out, in 2016, we almost hit 900 inmates. And that was before the government's 100% crackdown. We hit almost 900 inmates. So really, we're at the same point we were. Now, this other chart here, I have some questions, but I don't want an answer right now. I mean, I'm just, there was some stuff I was able to check on and some stuff I wasn't able to check on. But one of the things we did was that thing about 90% of federal inmates are facing immigration charges since May. I wasn't able to verify that, but I'll tell you that, again, with the limited time I had, I took a snapshot. And that snapshot was for the 25th of June. And we went through and counted, and this is for federal inmates, and we're at 70%, not 90%. So,
Sheriff, what I'm providing you there is the most up-to-date information that has information back from January of 2007 to May.
Yeah. But we're back to 90%. 2 out of 3 face first-time immigration charges. The only thing I would ask you to consider on that is that we don't know a lot of times whether or not these individuals have been deported before in the civil process, and then now they're caught again and they're in for the second time. But let me just let you know that I'm an elected official, but I'm also a law enforcement official. It's my job to enforce state laws within my jurisdiction and execute lawful process from the courts. I do my best to set the priorities of my agency based upon community expectations. Yet ultimately, I must follow the law in the discharge of my duties. It is the federal government that is responsible for the enforcement of the nation's immigration laws. We all know the system's broken and that we need comprehensive immigration reform. Until that time, we all have a responsibility to ensure that the federal government is enforcing immigration laws within the law, consistent with American values, and with dignity, respect, and ensuring due process for those accused of violating those laws. With this in mind, I've been adamant since my chief of police days that I do not believe that local law enforcement should be enforcing federal immigration law. I was able to direct my employees in that regard. However, now with SB 4 being law, I cannot stop my employees from asking those questions during lawful stops nor cooperating with federal immigration officials. On the other hand, I have been supportive, and always have been, of honoring federal detainees. Those individuals arrested for state crimes who are here in violation of federal immigration laws and have a hold on them placed by ICE so that they can face the federal law violation after the state violation is disposed of. And I've always considered that a public safety issue because I do not want to release criminals back into our streets. Now, of course, SB 4 makes honoring those detainers mandatory. Now, in regards to the tent city, off-duty employment is not mandatory. I'm able to place off limits those jobs that would cause conflict, place the agency in a bad light, or go against our values. That tent city is all of those, and my decision was a no-brainer. As far as holding federal prisoners, we have discussed at length in the past why it's beneficial to have this contract. It's not just access. It's the fact that we know that canceling this contract is not going to stop the federal government from doing its job of enforcing federal immigration laws. And those inmates will be moved to other facilities that do not have, that typically are private, that are there to make profit, that do not have inspections by the state, whose employees are not certified by the state. And the fact is that we do provide a better service, and we don't get bonuses, or nor are we in this to make money for a corporation. So when arrestees are presented at the intake window, we don't ask them questions surrounding their arrest. We accept them after a medical clearance based upon a warrant or order of confinement signed by the proper authority. And I bring that up because of the issue that you mentioned, Commissioner, to KTSM, that you feel that I'm being, what was your words? That it's a contradiction for me not to work the current city yet. We're housing immigrants. It would not be appropriate for my staff to question the details of the arrest or make unilateral decisions about who to accept and who to refuse. Because of all the local and national outcry, Trump signed an executive order stopping the separation of families. The U.S. Attorney for the Western District has sent out instructions not to criminally charge the adult, and a federal court out of California has ordered the practice stopped and the children reunited with their families. In effect, we are right back where we were last year when this issue was settled with this court. But let me point out, Commissioner, what I feel is the real contradiction. I get no benefit out of housing federal prisoners, other than the fact that we keep local citizens employed. Because if we didn't have those federal prisoners and those inmates were moved out to private jails, they would still be detained, again, by less trained, uncertified, lower salary, less benefit individuals. And it certainly is a benefit for many reasons to have these individuals here and to have these jobs here. It places the federal prisoners in a better position than if they were housed at some faraway jail. But I have to deal with additional inmates, which can be problematic. Additional employees. I think you had mentioned that if we got rid of federal prisoners, we could close the jail and eliminate about 280 positions. And the downtown jail, the facility itself. I mean, it takes a lot of work to run two jails. It takes a lot of work to supervise, hire, discipline, deal with all the issues with all those extra employees, and to deal with this number of inmates. It takes a lot of work. It'd make my job easier if I didn't house federal prisoners. But quite frankly, that's not the right thing to do. On the other hand, Commissioner Pettis, you have been on a crusade to end this federal contract and close the downtown jail for some time. And every time there is some national or local issue, you take the opportunity to bring this issue forward and try to push through your personal agenda. Today, it's the separation of families. Last year, it was SB 4. But interestingly, of all the immigration rallies I've attended, all the times I've gone to Austin and DC to testify on behalf of immigration reform and keeping local law enforcement out of immigration enforcement, all the fundraisers I've attended to support immigration issues, to include actually waiting on tables to raise money, I can't recall a single time I've ever seen you. You bring this issue forward each time as if you're an immigration advocate, but in fact you are not. You're an opportunist that is using the plight of immigrants to force through your personal agenda of closing the downtown jail by eliminating the federal contract and placing the immigrant in a much worse position.
And I would ask this for everyone who's going to speak, because I know there are several people who are signed up, that we really try to stick to the issue, because this is such an important issue to everyone, and people get incredibly passionate about this issue, that we try to keep it about the issue and not attack one another. This court has always been incredibly civil when it comes to these kinds of conversations. And so I can see why it would be incredibly easy to do that. But I would ask that we not. And so thank you for your comment, Sheriff. I'm not sure if you were...
No, I'm good.
I want to ask.
Okay. Commissioner Leno, did you want to...
Well, I just want to say, I never once engaged in a personal attack, Sheriff. It's unfortunate that you
I'm
did
just
so.
answering your statement to KTSM.
All I gave here today were facts. And
I'm talking about your statement to KTSM.
Well, all I said here were facts while you were here, and I was very respectful of you being here, and I'd appreciate the same respect. I don't know why it is we can't have a civil discourse about this, but to make this personal, I think is a little.
I'm not making it personal.
Cheap and
I'm just
disingenuous.
pointing out the facts. Also.
Okay, you've had your piece. Just to issue, when you say that there's no, I mean, when you said there's no benefit to El Paso County, we just saw in the slide today from the auditors that they've revised the revenue projections to $31 million. And we have a room full of media. We have a room here full of engaged citizens. We have a room here of commissioners. I
said there was no benefit to me.
Okay, but to this county, where do you think that that 25, 30 million, where does that go? We are engaged, and this is the largest enterprise that El Paso County is engaged in. And it is probably the largest enterprise of any county in the United States. I'm surprised that there isn't a federal law or state law prohibiting counties from engaging in this massive enterprise. It was sold to taxpayers in 2012 that your jail needed additional capacity. You came before the Commissioner's Court at the time. We were not here, but you said that you needed additional space. Is that true or not true?
Is
that true or not true?
You're misleading statements. If you'll remember, first of all, the money that comes in under that contract goes to offset the cost of the jail. Hold on, let me answer your question.
Expansion.
Let me answer your questions. The decision to expand the jail annex was done before I got here by the previous sheriff's administration and by the court. Then, as this proceeded through, I had a discussion with some of the members of the old administration as to why they felt it was necessary for that expansion. And the main reason was to ensure they had the capacity to handle the potential number of inmates given the crime rate at that time. And I supported that. And there were some other options that we could use. One was to shift prisoners from downtown to the annex to reduce the cost of housing inmates because it's more expensive. And then the last was that we would have the capacity, if we needed it, to lease those beds to the federal government. And I've stood by those statements ever since.
And your department made a presentation to the Commissioner's Court while you were sheriff supporting the expansion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what I wanted to say is that jail was expanded under the impression that there was a need for additional space. And that ultimately turned out not to be true. That additional space, let's be very clear, is housing federal inmates.
No, that was never the intent.
No, but that's what it's being used for now.
Well, yes, but that was never the intent. It was the potential increase in beds needed by state prisoners. And you can see the ADP rose
and as a result,
in January.
I just want to say that El Paso County generates $30 million a year after the jail was expanded, under the impression and under the pretenses that it needed to be expanded for additional space. Those additional 450 beds that went to the annex are effectively being used for the exclusive use of federal inmates. Under the contract, we are obligated to have a minimum of 500 beds available.
Right.
True or not true?
Yes.
Okay. And the high population that we achieved in the last couple months, the population was as high as 1,054.
On one occasion.
No. There were several days where it got over 1,000.
That's not my understanding.
I can pull up the list and show it to you.
And it fluctuates all the time.
But I just want to be clear. When we talk about the benefit, and again, this isn't between you, Sheriff. This is about the county's position of whether or not we should be engaged in this massive enterprise where we are generating revenue off of the misery and off of the detention of people, of mothers that have been separated from their children, of fathers that have been separated from their children, and people who are being detained for prolonged periods for nonviolent offenses because our federal government is pursuing a very inhumane and cruel policy. We are generating money off of the misery of others. And we are generating more money than any other place in this nation. And I find that disgusting.
Commissioner Leon had a question for the sheriff.
Yeah, before you leave, Sheriff, something that you mentioned, Commissioner Perez, is that simply saying that we have a nicer jail to house these inmates is not the answer. But for you, Sheriff, you touched on it. Would you agree with me that by giving up this contract, these prisoners probably will go to a private jail? And a private jail, in my opinion, is less transparent and less accountable.
Those were the exact conversations we had last year over this very issue. And we had meetings with Border Patrol, who was prepared to move all those inmates out to other private jails that would be willing to house them. Because they want the inmates. They make money off the inmates. And you're absolutely right. Jails are not a pleasant thing at all. But private jails do not have the same state oversight. The employees are not trained to the same level. They don't have the state certifications that are required. And the transparency, you're absolutely right. We allow access in our jails. We do tours all the time. The immigrant advocacy groups come in. We had the Border Network there a while back come in and do a tour. The Consulate General comes in. We have the Consulate General's phone number posted. Those calls are free to any individual who needs to talk to that agency to ensure their rights are protected. I mean, ending the contract is not going to end the federal government's responsibility to enforce immigration law and hold people accountable for violating those laws. And I absolutely agree with you about the terrible situation, about the separation of families. That's been addressed. The court's ruled.
The president said it was temporary.
Well,
and now he's suggesting they don't have due process. But also, one point I want to make clear is that there are other service providers like DMRS that if you go to their website right now, they say that the two facilities that they serve are the federal facility on Hawkins and the facility in Otero County. El Paso County Jail is not listed as one of their facilities that is served.
Have you reached out to them by chance? Because I'm not sure if
we did in the last year, and this time we didn't, but if you go on their website, that information is there. It shows the two facilities that they serve. Why? Because they do not serve people that are being charged criminally. They primarily address civil cases and people who are facing deportation. So this whole notion that folks are somehow getting better access to care, that people in our jail have somehow won the lottery, that they're going to get better access to services, it is not true.
The ending of the contract is not going to stop the federal government from prosecuting, and those people are not going to end up in those
Nor am I
facilities.
suggesting that it is. No time did I say that this is going to solve our nation's immigration problem. What I am suggesting is that we have to really take a look and examine ourselves. Is this what we want to be engaged in? Is this what we want to facilitate? Simple as that.
It'll put them in a worse position than they are.
And you know what? Other cities that are quoted in the New York Times article recognize that, and they say that unfortunately a lot of these people are going to be transferred to private facilities, but at least their government and their local communities won't be engaged in facilitating it.
And I would agree that this is just such a tough issue because it is an emotional issue. What we're seeing at the federal government is absolutely unnecessary, especially when it comes to the separation of families, although we've been seeing inmates in our jail for a very long time. I don't know, Commissioner, if you had the chance to reach out to some of the service providers. I did, just briefly. I talked to Maureen Franco with the Federal Public Defender's Office, and I asked her, look, we've had this conversation on more than one occasion. Do you think that given the situation that we're seeing now, if this has caused a change in your position? You know, are we to the point where maybe we do need to cancel the contract because we're not going to see any difference if you do or you don't? And her words to me were that she thinks, and I'm just sharing that because she's not here, that it might make the situation worse, especially because of the families that have been separated. Because it is their ability then to be able to try to help reunify them. And I'm just sharing what she has said. You know, I don't know, part of it, and it's so difficult to wrap our heads around this because it seems like every day the situation is in flux and it's constantly changing. One day you've got a zero tolerance policy, then you have the executive order, then you've got Tornillo, then it's going to close potentially, then we've got Fort Bliss that might be coming online. So it's hard to be able to figure out what the situation will look like over the next several months, at least in my mind, just because there's this constant flux of decisions that are being changed. Just today, like the sheriff mentioned, we've seen a decrease in the population. I don't remember the exact number, but by 300, is that accurate, Sheriff? About 300 that were there, and now they're not. Where did they go? I have no idea. My only concern, in talking to some of these folks, like Fernando Garcia with Border Network and the Hope Border Institute and Dylan Corbett, is where will they go if not in our jail? Because I don't know that any of us necessarily have that answer. Could they go to Otero, Sierra Blanca, a private facility? I don't know. And would they be worse off? I don't necessarily know, but it seems like they might be. I don't know. And so that's a tough call for us to make. And so I do appreciate, Commissioner, that you bring this forward for us to have the discussion because it is incredibly important. But there are so many unanswered questions. You know, I appreciate the fact that you were offering the court some options to consider. Like, do we start to put some resources toward trying to reunify families, or what can we do? And I'm not sure if legally we even have that opportunity because I'm not sure if it's within the scope of county government or not. But, you know, I appreciate that you brought up those options. Commissioner Harrington?
It's a horrible situation. We deal with horrible situations every day. I was in a meeting yesterday about homelessness. On Monday, we had Anthony in the school district talking about 60,000 meals they had to offer over the last 5 years to children who didn't have them. We are always going to be in a situation where we can vote on a motion. A motion is not the way to vote. Because of a motion, based on the numbers I heard last time we had this conversation a year ago, if we cancel this contract, we will lose over $23 million. What I understand from our budget office, we can't cut $23 million from our budget. Firing 300 hardworking county employees is not the answer. Raising everyone's taxes because we now have to make up a budget deficit is not the answer. Because as we've said, emotionally, okay, great, we feel better about ourselves, but I guarantee the people who've lost their jobs don't. I guarantee the people whose taxes went up don't. And I guarantee the people who are now in a worse situation because they're in a worse facility, farther away from their families and their lawyers, aren't happy either. It's really easy to vote the easy emotional way. We're put here to do a job, and our job, unfortunately, is not this. He has a duty to do, as he said, he is a law enforcement officer sworn to uphold the laws. I don't want him to be in a situation where he gets to decide what he thinks is against the law and not. Oh, I don't believe that's really a criminal act, so I'm not going to put him in our jail. That's not his job to make. It's a horrible situation. It has created horrible differences with him because it's an all or nothing situation. And anytime you let emotion get involved, reason goes up. And I do not think firing 300 hardworking employees and raising your county tax dollars is the answer.
Right. Commissioners, I don't know if you're okay with starting to take public comment on this before we continue to engage in dialogue. Sheriff, if you would say, just in case there are additional questions, if that's okay.
No, I gotta leave.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Okay.
So if anybody has not signed up to speak, the clerk has forms for you. If you would please sign up. So I'll go ahead and start to call those that have already signed up. Mr. Jaime Abetia, Mr. Jaime Abetia, I'm not sure if he's outside or listening.
Judge, would you mind if I go first?
Would you mind if, do you have to leave?
I can wait here.
Okay, okay, thanks, Jaime, appreciate it.
3 minutes, sir?
Yes, there'll be 3 minutes for, which is a standard for public comment on an item.
Yes.
Thank you all for your patience. I know that there were several long presentations ahead of this, so thank you for being patient.
The 20.
I only have one job. Mr. Robert Fortin, with the El Paso Sheriff's Office Association.
Yes, thank you, Judge, Commissioners. I'm going to keep it extremely short. We've already looked at the numbers. I've provided you guys some numbers based off of TCJS stats. The sheriff did the same, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse. Commissioner, you spoke very passionately about families, about children, about destitute. The question that I have, and it's rhetorical, but are you willing to resign your position and your livelihood to have this contract rescinded? Because that's exactly what you're asking these employees that work for the Sheriff's Department. They have their own families. They have their own kids. This is their livelihood. And the decision that you guys make, be emotional. It is a humanitarian situation that everybody is concerned about, that everybody's emotional about, but it comes back to that one factor. I heard safety in the facility. I heard income. I heard generating income in other places. The one thing I didn't hear about until the very end was the families of the people that work for this county. And it was my understanding that that is our purpose. As a government, as an entity, is to sit there and protect those citizens of El Paso County first. So I pose that question to you. If this goes to a vote, if we're looking at that contract, what are you going to tell the families of those 300 officers that have to lose their job? When the sheriff has to come to that officer, whether it be the new guy or the guy that's been there for 5 years, and say, you know what, sorry, you no longer have a job. You can no longer provide for your family. Now you can't pay for your house and your bills. So I understand that it's an emotional situation. I understand that it's a tough spot for you to be in. But I would like you to please take into consideration the citizens of El Paso and the employees of this county, as well as the immigrants that you're speaking. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Mr. Abeytia?
Morning, Judge and Commissioners. Believe it or not, this is actually the first time I've ever addressed Commissioner's Court. And it is surprising. And I'm glad I actually came after my union brother here, because it's about jobs that I think is an important conversation to be having. I've heard people talk about the emotion of this issue as though it's a bad thing, as though it's a weakness, as though it's something that should be wrong. We should care. We should be emotional about this because it's about the lives of other people. And what I'm hearing is profit over people. What I'm hearing is, and this is a decision that the court has to make, and I really hope that you guys take this into consideration deeply. Before President Eisenhower left his office, he warned about the military-industrial complex. Well, what we're seeing today is something I call the immigration-industrial complex, where you have an entire structure built on profit, revenue generation, and you just heard a union rep talk about the jobs that it creates. And so this is the struggle for this community and the decision that you all here have at this court. Do you feel profit is more important than people? If you do, then there's, then at least you're being ideologically consistent. But I have watched people, elected officials, trip over themselves to get in front of a camera in Tornillo because they allegedly care so much about immigration. But the folks that are in positions to actually resist, to actually stand up, to actually do something about the policies put forth by the administration, no one has done anything. This is the first time that there has been anybody who has had the ability to do something rather than just watch and say nothing. This is the first time that that's being discussed and talked about. And folks are talking like it's a bad thing to be having this conversation. If you have the ability to do something, and trust me, I know a whole lot of people that would like to. And, not everybody who supports a cause shows up to get a photo op in front of a camera. I acknowledge that. There's a lot of people that are watching this meeting that have probably been immigration reform advocates for years that don't go to those dog and pony shows. But they support people who actually are in a position to do something to make a substantive change. This is not something we are required to do. Will it change the fact that the government is still going to incarcerate undocumented immigrants? No, but it will say that we as a community reject those types of policies. And I have to say that I commend the sheriff for taking a stand and saying, I don't want my employees working at that camp. And what he is saying when he says that is that he rejects that policy. And that as a community, that doesn't meet our standards. So if it doesn't meet our standards in Tornillo, why does it meet our standards across the street? Because no matter how you do this, and believe me, you're going to hear a lot of elected officials contort themselves and do political yoga into saying, hey, I'm against Tornillo, but I'm okay with the jail contract. But the reality is this, it's still about housing immigrants, and it's still about doing it for profit. And so I'll conclude with something that in the military that I heard, I'll finish with this thought. In the military, we used to hear, I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. History has looked upon, I was just doing my job very negatively. And I ask you all to consider that we are now in a very crucial time. How will history judge you guys for your actions on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Actually, I have Georgina Perez.
If he's in a hurry, I have
Are you in
time
a
to
hurry,
wait.
Mr.
I'm fine.
Cook? You don't? Sure.
Wow. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Is it still morning?
Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. And contrary to what Jaime said, I have addressed you many times. I think perhaps Perhaps you may know that a few weeks ago, I worked with Congressman O'Rourke to get a temporary visa for a mother to come across the border and watch her daughter graduate. It took us 12 hours so she could legally drive 20 minutes. Her worry, in a moment that she should have been celebrating, was that the policies that we choose to enforce here with this type of contract, that she would be detained. And she has a 10-year-old son at home with Down syndrome. And she wouldn't be able to go back. And so she had to choose between her children. And I appreciate not wanting to inject emotion and perhaps be more pragmatic in policy decisions. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the same body also passed a resolution that we do not support the baby jail in Tornillo. I will also add that I live in Tornillo and I drive by that place every day. I will also add that it was this body that felt so strongly against SB4 that not only did you decide to enter into a lawsuit, you felt so passionately about anti-SB4 that you did not take up MALDEF on their free services. You entered into your own lawsuit at the county's expense. If that was not emotion and that was pragmatic, I failed to see the pragmatism. If we are going to stand up and say that it is wrong to separate children from parents, then how do we sit here and say it is okay to separate parents from children? And that is absolutely a rational discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, for your patience. Appreciate it. Mr. Cook?
Judge, Commissioners, I came and testified the last time this issue was at Commissioners Court. And I would point out that there's only one thing that's changed since then, and that's the federal policy of having zero tolerance, which now has stopped, even if it's only temporarily. So I think the Commissioners Court made a wise decision last time. You evaluated the economies of scale of housing of the federal prisoners here, the care that they would get here compared to what they would get in private jails. As mayor, I traveled to some of those private prisons because we were looking at having one located here. You remember that. They are a lot worse than what we provide. As the sheriff mentioned, these are not certified agents that are housing these prisoners. They have no state oversight. We have the state oversight, and I think our hearts all go out to these families that have been separated from their children by a new federal policy. But I would hope that we would not have a knee-jerk reaction to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Is there anyone else? I think the last individual to speak then is Mr. Alberto Halpern on behalf of Commissioner Stout.
Good morning. Alberto Halpern with David Stout's office, Commissioner David Stout. He is sorry that he couldn't make it to this meeting. He particularly wanted to speak about this item. That's why we requested to delete it and postpone it to a meeting in which he was here. But despite the discussion taking place, he did ask that I read a statement he wrote just to add a little bit of his 2 cents to this. And it's relatively brief. On numerous occasions in the past, County Commissioner Vince Perez has argued that the county should cancel its contract with the federal government to house their prisoners. His initial argument held that the county was losing money due to the contract and effectively subsidizing the federal government. However, After a new rate was negotiated and changes made in the number of prisoners at our jail, he was unable to prove his point to the Commissioner's Court and convince us to do away with the contract. Last year, Commissioner Perez brought the federal prisoner issue up again, but this time under the premise that we were being hypocritical by advocating against anti-immigrant laws and at the same time housing undocumented immigrants in our jail. He made the point that the majority of federal prisoners in our jail are foreigners facing only charges for immigration law violations. This was very concerning to me because I do not agree with the policy of jailing people for such minor infractions. Though the point he makes may be very true, just because we take immigrants out of our jail doesn't mean they will be set free. Instead of making the decision in a vacuum with only the information provided to us by Commissioner Perez, we decided to reach out to a number of agencies and organizations that provide services to this population here in El Paso to understand more deeply what the implications would be for the immigrants that would be affected by the decision. The overwhelming response was that we would be creating further hardships for these people as they go through the deportation process. The concerns were that if they are sent away, they would be housed in other jails that may have records of terrible conditions, abuse, and no oversight. That they would be separated from their families because of the distance and dangers of traveling outside of El Paso to visit them. That they would no longer have access to the community-based services they are receiving now in El Paso, and that their legal representation would suffer because they would be further away from the public defenders and the Mexican consulate that provides such assistance to its nationals. After this information was presented to the Commissioner's Court, the discussion ended with the majority agreeing to continue with the contract. It was no longer an issue of dollars and cents, but a humanitarian one. I would strongly urge the Commissioner's Court to continue to take these points into account as we move forward with any decision we make in regards to this issue. No, we don't want to be complicit with what is going on with the Trump administration, but I think the moral high road here is to make sure we aren't making things more difficult for immigrants by being the cause of further family separation and the loss of services that are so important for their well-being. Almost done. For the time being, my staff and I are reaching out to all the agencies and organizations with whom we spoke last year regarding this issue to see if their opinions have changed. I will also continue to advocate and fight for immigrants the same way I have for the majority of my adult life. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioners, do you have any other comments that you'd like to add? Commissioner Perez, I do want to just say, again, I appreciate you bringing this forward for us to consider again. It's unfortunately, I guess, timely given the terrible policies that are being put in place by our federal government. My concern still lies in where do they go next? If not here, where will they go? And will it be a private prison? Will it be Otero County where it will be a little more difficult? And I know that might not sound like the ideal answer, but what will happen? And we're being told by some of the advocates that there would be a hardship placed on them potentially because families wouldn't be able to go visit them, whether it's because they'd have to cross through Sierra Blanca or they don't have the capacity to get out there, which puts an additional strain on some of those who are trying to provide a service, like the work being done by Mr. Ruben Garcia. I think he mentioned at one point there was a family that was a family of a mother, a father, a grandmother, and 2 kids. And the mother and the grandmother and kids were released, but the father was still in jail, but he was kept in New Mexico. And they asked the Annunciation House for assistance to try to make it out to see him, but they are so tapped with resources that it was hard to be able to get them out there. If they would have been in El Paso, it might have been an easier situation. And so this does present such a difficult question for us to grapple with because it's not an easy one. But I appreciate all the effort in putting this information together, Commissioner. I don't know if other commissioners have any other comments. Commissioner Perez, did you want to?
One of the other things I suggested was if the court is so determined to keep this contract, then I think that we could explore those other options of either if they want to continue housing migrants, then I think the revenue generated from that, I think a portion should go to families, particularly those that I think have gone through unimaginable, very traumatic experiences. It's undeniable that again, mothers and fathers have been in our county jail. They were there after they were separated from their children. And just saying again, I mean, basically, a lot of what I heard today was we jail a little bit better. I mean, that's what we're saying, is that we're using incarceration as a tool to advance some sort of humanitarian objective. I strongly disagree that incarceration should be used like that. But one other suggestion, I hope the court is open to it, is to consider, in this time of crisis, I think considering that people are using our facilities to support some of the organizations like Annunciation House that are really doing their best in this awful environment where people have gone through such trauma. Anything we can do to help alleviate that or help to advance that, I think, is something we should consider.
And I know there had been discussion about whether or not the county could engage in some sort of like immigrant rights, not immigrant rights, I shouldn't say that, but like an office of immigrant relations or of some sort for us to be able to offer some kind of assistance in the past. But I don't recall, Ms. Bernal, if legally we were able to expend funds for that, or?
I don't think we specifically addressed the issue of like a contract or service for a nonprofit. That's a different situation than some of the others that were discussed. But we're happy to meet with Ms. Keller and explore precisely what, if any, kind of assistance or support we could give to the local nonprofits. And we can report back to the court, or Ms. Keller can.
I mean, I would be definitely open to looking into that. I think it is important. They have done such great work for such a long time, and funding has always been an incredible need of theirs, and I think they're starting to see some influx now with this crisis. But part of what they've said as well is, we've been doing it for so long, the money and the attention will go away at some point, but the problem may still remain. And so if there's anything that we can do to assist in that capacity, that I would be interested in that information. Well, we're not signed up for any action on this item, but appreciate the conversation. Thank you to all those that took the time to come out today to speak on the item.
Is anyone from Public Works here to speak on this?
Item
And they
number
are
6.
They just didn't want to be in here for the fun?
Item number 6, discuss and take appropriate action to approve the submission of a letter of intent to the PSB to complete an update to the 2010 Stormwater Master Plan to add a Montana Sector Stormwater Master Plan.
Did you see mine?
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Judge, Commissioners. We have Fernie Hernandez and Gilbert Saldana. They're from our Public Works Department. They are working on the Stormwater Master Plan update that we've been working with PSB or El Paso Water Utilities to, as you know, the 2010 Stormwater Master Plan was a joint project between the county, PSB, and the Texas Water Development Board. And we've been working with them on updating that plan so we can address the stormwater needs for the community. And Fernie and Gilbert, I'll turn it over to them, but they're here representing the department on this item today.
Okay. Yes, as Beth mentioned, in 2009, we entered into an interlocal agreement with El Paso Water Utilities, with this agreement, we funded a grant that was obtained from Texas Water Development Board, and for this study, we studied flooding issues associated with arroyos that span from the Canutillo, Socorro, Clint, Pavens, the Socorro areas. And so with that study, conceptual solutions were determined along with cost estimates. The study was completed in 2010, and as a result of the flooding events in recent years and county efforts, in seeking grants to solve the drainage issues, it was determined that it'd be best to include the East Montana sector as part of the stormwater master plan. And so therefore, the county has coordinated with El Paso Water Utilities to expand the stormwater master plan study. And it was determined that it would cost the county $282,200 and have requested a county, from the county, a letter of intent to proceed with the process. And so before you, you have the letter of intent that we're proposing.
And Gilbert, I emailed you this morning, but I know you haven't had a chance to see it. I do believe what they're calling the Montana sector plan update, what EPWU is calling the Montana sector plan update, it includes several elements of updating the plan that we requested. Because when I looked in the backup, it looked like it also includes some of the other areas that we requested from EPWU to update the plan. So it also includes prioritizing the existing projects that are in the plan. And it also includes the methodology of like the cost benefit analysis. So this, while we're calling this the Montana sector plan update, it actually includes several aspects of updating a plan. Some of those would be done, they're breaking it into two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. But from what I can see in the backup, it appears that this will address several of the concerns and that the county requested EPWU work on updating our plan for. And as far as the funding we've set aside for this, we are requesting you all to approve us submitting this letter of intent. The timeline is because their board is meeting next week, and the deadline to get it on the agenda is tomorrow, or to get the backup in is tomorrow. So that's part of our urgency in getting it approved today. And the funding would be the stormwater funding that's been set aside. If we were to be awarded all 9 grants that we've submitted for, and that we have a match, and with the equipment we purchased, and with this expense to update the plan, for this fiscal year, we'd be at about between $4.3 and $4.4 million expended. And that's the likelihood of us getting all 9 grant projects awarded is not likely. But that would be as if we won all 9 grants and all 9 matches. So we're still under the amount the court allocated for stormwater master planning.
The only concern I have is, and I have asked this of you this morning, Betsy, was when I read the backup, and the letter was put together very quickly, but the question I have is that we've asked so much more from the water utility when it comes to updating this plan, and when I read the letter that we put on our letterhead, it specifically talked about this Montana sector, and you're telling us that it may be a little broader than that. So, I mean, I'd like to edit the letter to reflect that, and if the court's okay with approving this, with those edits be all encompassing of what you've mentioned.
Sure.
So that we can codify that to include the new area, but also look at ranking the projects and anything else that they are committing to doing for this $282,000.
I don't have a problem with the amending of it. We can put in there what we originally submitted to them. The language that I originally submitted to EPWU outlined all the work in the plan that we were requesting. They're just calling this update, at the header of their spreadsheet, they call it the Montana sector update. But it does include those things in there.
I'd like to do that, so I'd like
Sure.
to edit the letter to include all of that, and if the court's okay with approving with those edits, just to also protect us, to show that this is what we're paying for and that is what needs to be executed.
Sure.
I don't know if the members of the court have any issue with that. Okay. I appreciate the update. I know we've been waiting for quite some time to get this information back. Unfortunately, the monsoon season is almost upon us again. But the sooner we get this plan updated and rank these projects, the sooner we can then, as a county, start to execute some of them, whether they be through grant funding, and make sure we have an appropriate set aside for matching funds. And I know we're also still waiting on the legal structure for how we can begin to work on implementing some sort of fee for the future. So we'll continue to try to push that along, but this is at least one step forward, and I appreciate the water utility being so open to collaborate with us. And I hope we can move very quickly on some of the other items that have been lagging, and we've been really waiting for them to get us some of that information.
And just I forgot to mention, it also, part of this was also helping us with a grant, identifying some grant funding, I believe. And that includes some grant application package preparation in the backup.
Basically, starting on this with Public Works, and basically what they're going to do is they're going to prepare a complete package, give us a benefit cost analysis, update our priorities, and so that way when funding comes available, we can just take that information, package it up, and send it in as part of our grant application. So basically, all the legwork will be there, just so we can, as it becomes available, we can kind of pick and sort and submit those.
Excellent. Okay. I appreciate it. I'd make a motion to approve submitting the letter for the update of the 2010 Stormwater Plan as outlined, but with changes that specify all of the work that will be done for this amount of money.
Second.
Commissioner Bettis? Aye. Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Commissioner Haggard? Aye. Judge Wilson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all so much. I think that is the end of the agenda. Appreciate it. Thank you for being patient. We are adjourned for today. Good afternoon.
This concludes today's meeting at 12:09 p.m.